Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim, and you're watching Türkiye Diplomacy. Turkey's diplomacy is once again at the center of fast-moving global developments as President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan intensifies efforts to push for a lasting ceasefire and reconstruction in Gaza. From Cairo to Riyadh, Ankara is coordinating closely with regional partners to halt Israeli attacks, address the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and lay the groundwork for long-term stability. At the same time, Turkey is deepening strategic ties through major energy investments, strengthening post-earthquake recovery at home, and navigating shifting power balances from Syria to Ukraine. Today, we'll break down the moves that are shaping Turkey's influence across diplomacy and global affairs with Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik. Prem Singh Gill from the Royal Asiatic Society in London will be joining me in the second half to discuss the war in Ukraine. Let's begin.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Egypt on Wednesday, marking the second leg of his regional tour and underscoring Turkey's intensified diplomatic push for peace and stability. The talks followed Turkish president's visit to Saudi Arabia, where he held high-level meetings as part of Ankara's broader effort to play a central mediating role amid escalating regional tensions. Erdoğan and el-Sisi held official talks before co-chairing the second meeting of the Turkey-Egypt High-Level Strategic Cooperation Council, signaling a shared commitment to deepening political coordination and dialogue. Discussions focused on strengthening bilateral ties as well as regional and international developments, with particular emphasis on Gaza, humanitarian needs and post-conflict reconstruction.
Ortak gündemimizin başlıca konusunu Filistin davası teşkil ediyor. Şurası bir gerçek ki ateşkes tesis edilmiş olmakla birlikte Gazze'deki insani dram halen devam ediyor. Şarm el-Şeyh deklarasyonunu sabote etmeyi amaçlayan bu saldırıları ve ihlalleri reddediyoruz. Gazze'de barışı mümkün kılacak girişimlerde Mısır'la birlikte çalışıyoruz. İnşallah bunu da devam ettireceğiz.
Erdoğan reiterated Turkey's position that lasting peace in the region requires diplomacy, dialogue and coordinated international efforts rather than military escalation. The leaders also highlighted the importance of economic cooperation as a stabilizing force, with Erdoğan attending the closing session of the Turkey-Egypt Business Forum to encourage trade and investment.
Mısır, Türkiye'nin Afrika'daki en büyük ticaret ortağı olmayı sürdürüyor. Son 3 yıldır 8 ila 9 milyar dolar aralığında seyreden ticaret hacmimizi 15 milyar dolara yükseltmeyi hedefliyoruz. Türk firmalarının Mısır'daki yatırımlarının 4 milyar dolara yaklaşmasından ziyadesiyle memnunuz.
Turkish officials said that the Cairo meetings reflect Ankara's determination to couple economic engagement with active peace diplomacy across the Middle East.
Toprak bütünlüğü korunmuş, siyasi birliği sağlanmış bir Suriye'nin en büyük kazananı tüm bölgemiz olacaktır. Biz Suriye'deki büyük dönüşümün destekçisiyiz. Bu desteği sürdürmekte kararlıyız. Mısır tarafından Suriye'nin birliğinin muhafazasına yönelik yapılan açıklamaları isabetli buluyor ve destekliyoruz.
The president's back-to-back engagements in Riyadh and Cairo were presented as part of Turkey's broader strategy to prevent new conflicts, support regional dialogue and contribute to sustainable peace.
Komşumuz İran'la özellikle dış müdahalelerin tüm bölge için önemli riskler teşkil edeceği kanaatindeyiz. İran'la nükleer dosya dahil meselelerin diplomatik yollarla çözümü en isabetli yöntemdir.
Welcome back to the program. Dr. Mehmet Çelik, Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator. Nice to have you back in the studios.
Thank you, Omar.
Dr. Mehmet, Daily Sabah is back. Now we will focus on the front page, the top headlines. Let's discuss those. A very interesting picture is on the front page, Mehmet. Erdoğan, Sisi in Egypt. Obviously, we know what happened this week. The Turkish president, he was in Saudi Arabia, then he went to Egypt. Now, Mehmet, when you look at this picture, what is the significance of this picture in Cairo?
Well, I mean, when we look at the picture, without going into so much in the background of the story, the picture shows two very strong countries in the region walking side by side. I think there is a symbolic reflection of this on the ground as well. What I mean by that is, for a very long time, Turkey and Egypt, for various reasons over their disagreements, they were in a way a sideline from one another. Okay, they were on different paths. They had different views on issues that pushed them away from one another. Now, the course of events in the region, the natural developments and the course of events in the region have brought them together. Mr. Erdogan's first visit this year was to Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, before Cairo, and then he moved to Cairo. I think these two countries, Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they are two significant, of course, players in the region. And the fact that Mr. Erdogan visited these two countries, not only due to bilateral reasons and relations, be it economic or other areas of cooperation, but because I think the recent developments in the region, mainly what happened with the genocide in Gaza, the situation in Yemen, the events in Sudan, the Syria reconstruction or post-conflict developments and the new government there, the situation between United States and Iran, how Israel is expanding its policy of invasion and instability in the region, the developments in Southeast Asia between Pakistan and India have brought these three countries together because they believe that the region will only benefit from stability rather than instability and chaos that some of the other actors in the region want to bring in. So this picture for me, when they were walking side by side, Mr. Erdogan and Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, it shows that they have the same view on many issues in the region. Of course, bilaterally, let's say, there has been a very strong momentum in the recent years after a long period of pause in the relations, in trade and in economic cooperation and in tourism, for example. But now they are able to look at the regional developments and regional conflicts, regional situation from the same perspective as well. Because the conflict in Sudan, for example, is not only harming Turkey's relations or Turkish interests in the region, but it's also affecting Egypt. The situation in Yemen is not only affecting the instability in Yemen or the trade, perhaps, routes in that region, but it is also affecting Saudi Arabia's influence in the region. When we look at Syria, for example, the unity, territorial integrity, and reconstruction and stability in Syria will benefit the region in the wider aspect. When we look at what Gaza genocide brought to the region, be it for Saudi Arabia, be it for Egypt, for Lebanon, for Qatar, for basically the whole region, that instability that brought does not only negatively affect people in Gaza, it trickles down to the wider region. But so as the bigger countries, powerhouses in the region. Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and other countries, if they have the same perspective, then they can bring a solution, at least.
Mehmet, can we say that this trip, this visit, also unites these world leaders? Because it's not necessary that all of them are on the same page, right?
Well, actually, that's what I'm trying to say, that the natural course of events and the situation in the region have put them back on the same track. So now they're walking on the same path as they are in the picture, walking on the, maybe we can show it to the cameras. I don't know if we can view it from here. This is our front page of today. And we see Mr. Erdogan walking on the side of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. It's a very symbolic picture, as you said. So they have the same view on many events right now. Of course, it is not possible to agree 100% on every issue, but on major conflicts in the region and how to find a solution, let's say in Gaza, in Syria, in Yemen, in Libya. Libya is also another important issue for Egypt as well. Turkey and Egypt are almost on the same page on almost all of these issues right now. So the fact that Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia are on the same page on major issues, it helps, when they are on the same page, it helps them to at least contribute to stability or to bring a solution to the ongoing conflicts. If they had different agreements, they could perhaps be rivals, they could be competing, etc.
Mehmet, that's what was happening a few years ago, right? Turkey and Egypt, Turkey and Saudi Arabia.
Yes, as I said, for a very long time, for various reasons, Turkey and Egypt were not on the same page, and they had very minimal relations, Turkey and Saudi Arabia as well. But that has been already put aside. The relations have already normalized. Not only have they normalized, they're also deepening now. And I think this is a very important establishment of relations, not only, as I said, for bilateral reasons. Turkey and Saudi Arabia, for example, it is again another story on our front page, will be jointly establishing a power plant in Turkey, which is worth a solar power plant investment, which is worth $2 billion. As Turkey is trying to diversify its energy sources for electricity and focus mainly on renewables, this is a big development. This is a bilateral issue. Turkey and Egypt, they're trying to improve their and increase their bilateral trade to 15 billion. They want to increase the exchange of tourists between one another. So tourism is also positively being impacted. But when we look at the region-wide issues, it is very important, and I think it needs to be highlighted that both Saudi Arabia and Cairo, Saudi Arabia and Egypt are on the same page in almost all issues for the region. For Iran, for example, the situation between Iran and the United States, and it is another story we covered on our front page, as the U.S. will be, there's the possibility of Iranian side meeting the U.S. officials in Oman tomorrow on Friday. They're also looking at the issue from the same perspective, that an interference or an all-out war will be a disaster for the region. So the fact that the Saudi Arabia said we are not opening our airspace for any attacks on Iran, I think it's an important development. This is the same argument that Turkey says. We are against any external interference, and that Iranians should solve their problems domestically, and the disagreements between the United States and Iran should be solved through diplomatic channels. I think these are very important issues that all these countries are on the same page: Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. And I'm talking about these three specifically because we know that in the Arab Street, Saudi Arabia and Egypt are very important players. And of course, Turkey's international role in different conflicts has been recognized by the whole international community, from Ukraine, Russia conflict, to the developments in Syria, to Turkey's efforts as part of the Board of Peace in Gaza, to Horn of Africa in issues between Somalia and Somaliland, to Sudan, to Ethiopia. So there's many conflicts that Turkey is interfering, and it is important that Turkey is on the same page, or at least they have the same view on issues with these two players. Now, on our front page, Omar, if I may, I want to highlight one important story, which is aside from the diplomatic issues, and that is tomorrow. It is the anniversary of the very deadly and unfortunate earthquake we experienced in Turkey in 2023, February 6th earthquake, as you know, took away 50,000 lives, more than 50,000 lives, and devastated an 11-province region. I mean, that trauma there, that wound is still very fresh in terms of the human side of it. But I think it's important that we highlight that the reconstruction efforts in that region have been immense, have been, it is almost beyond human imagination that these towns were brought to rubble with the earthquake. Hatay, for example, was erased, was brought to rubble. Adıyaman, Gaziantep, Malatya, Kahramanmaraş, the epicenter of the earthquake. 3 years on, with nearly 10 billion of funds for recovery, the towns have been rebuilt.
Mehmet, 10 billion for recovery, but it's a very big amount, which has been issued by international organizations as well. The total cost, of the impact was around $100 billion. If you combine all of those 11 provinces, it's too much.
This is why I mean, there's the human side of it, and that wound that is still fresh in people's minds and in their hearts, in their daily lives, because there's still people that feel that fresh human side of it because they've lost, their whole family, for example. Their maybe tens of their loved ones were lost in one night. This is a very deep wound in the human hearts, in our memory, that will continue to be with us for many, many years ahead. But what the government, what the state has done is, of course, to at least help people bring back their homes, or rebuild their houses, rebuild their streets, rebuild the infrastructure, rebuild their cities so that their daily lives can be back to normal. And, if you, for our viewers, if they have a chance to view some of the imagery from the earthquake time and compare it to what we have right now, the developments there, it is like day and night. And the fact that this was done in 3 years, it's a very short period of time to rebuild all the whole region from scratch, and to be able to contribute to this healing period for the people. I think this is a very significant development, significant effort that the state put forward to show that, yes, this was a natural disaster.
Mehmet, what were your feelings when you went to the earthquake zone in 2023? What did you see? How were you feeling? I was there as well. I visited Adana, Kahramanmaraş, Gaziantep, and it was devastating, to say the least. And like you said, families torn apart, entire families killed. How were you feeling at that point, when you went there and you saw the destruction for yourself?
Omar, I mean, as an outsider, as someone who have lived through some earthquakes, small size, but as an outsider, of course you feel the sorrow, you feel sad, you feel shocked, you feel like this is an apocalyptic scenery. But we are an outsider. Those who lived that moment, those who were shaken by the tremors, by the that strong magnitude of the earthquake, the survivors will answer you better for this question. And it is not in my place or anybody's to try to interpret their feelings, because this is something that I guess you have to live to really be able to share what that meant. In addition to that devastation, about the destruction, about the cities being brought to rubble by that strong earthquake, that's a physical destruction. But what about the psychological destruction that people had to face when they saw all their loved ones gone in one night, and a building collapsed, their whole family is gone, their whole neighbor is gone, their communities were destroyed, their the heritage in those sites were destroyed. Their daily lives were no longer they were no longer able to continue their daily lives because of the amount and the scope of the scale of the destruction. But this is what I was trying to highlight. Of course, nobody can bring back the loved ones. Of course, that pain in the people's hearts and minds and souls, it is not easy to heal that. But what the state has done, they have rebuilt the towns, they have rebuilt homes, they have rebuilt the heritage that was damaged. They have rebuilt basically everything physical that is possible to be rebuilt. They have rebuilt that to show that the state is with its citizens, the government is there to serve the citizens, and also to be able to contribute to that healing process, to bring hope back to people's minds and hearts, and make their daily lives a little bit easier with that psychological trauma in their minds.
Mehmet, now I want to focus on another important story. Spain has taken some new measures when it comes to social media. It will ban social media for children under the age of 16. And Elon Musk has responded to the Spanish Prime Minister's statements and his decision. He says Pedro Sanchez is a tyrant and a traitor to the people of Spain for introducing new social media curbs for children under the age of 16. I believe Turkey is also looking at something like this, something similar. We saw Australia making that move in December. Tell us more about that.
Turkey and Spain and Greece and Australia, these are not only countries, and I believe some of the European countries other than Spain are trying to do the same thing. When we talk about social media and banning it for kids, children under the age of 15, 16, it is a very complicated situation because, one, you have to monitor that. Two, you have to monitor the context. And three, it is not just simple, naive exchange of thoughts and opinions when it comes to social media. There's a lot of, in the whole World Wide Web, www, in addition to social media, basically anything that is produced without monitoring, without control, without any sort of regulation on these devices that are accessible by an age group that we would consider not yet at a stage where they can make proper decisions, all that is very dangerous, because this is not just, the internet is not just going in there and finding some entertainment, finding some research, or it is not being used as a tool for only beneficial reasons. There is a lot of dangerous stuff that could exploit the children's uneducated mind and to draw them to different dangerous areas. One of them, for example, is online gambling. I mean, how would that affect not only children but their families? Not only one specific family, but the society. How will the new generation be facing this online gambling problem, for example? This is only one aspect of it, but there is other, exploitative nature of this content from very, when it comes to let's say the psychological effects on the children in terms of content that promotes aggressiveness, promotes violence, promotes hatred, promotes bullying, promotes sexual abuse, for example.
Mehmet, just to add something here, the European Commission has launched an investigation. Grok, X, Musk's Grok, artificial intelligence. Grok has come under fire for allowing users to create sexually explicit fake images of women and minors, just like you were saying a while ago.
So like I said, there is not only one, this is not a one-dimensional issue. When we look at it from the harm that it causes, it's a very multi-tier cause. Like I said, it could be online gambling, it could be explicit images, it could be abuse, it could be hatred. All this content, when it is being delivered or when it is made available for a consumption of an age group that still cannot make appropriate decisions or cannot filter properly, it then becomes very harmful, because these will be our future generations. Then we would talk about bullying at schools. Well, if the online content is teaching that, or when that bullying that could be physically stopped at a school environment, for example, or could be educated when it is carried to online, when it carried to social media, when it carried to an area without regulation, without monitoring, without control, then it actually is spread not only to people that are in a classroom, for example, but it is spread to millions. Imagine body shaming, for example, among teenagers. That is very widely, it's a very wide problem.
Maybe children are becoming suicidal because of these things.
Exactly. So I think there is a big danger in this if it is not regulated. It is not as naive or as democratic as people put it, because we don't have the luxury to expose our children to every single content that is produced by those who may have an intention, harmful intention. And by those who deliberately have a harmful intention, not only for their personal or, let's say, their corporate gains, but these are now being used as strategic weapons by countries against others. These issues are planted as seeds in a society to destroy a society. If you have destroyed the children of a society, you destroy the hopes and the future of a society. If you destroy the family because of these issues, then you're destroying the society itself. I think it's very important that we keep, we keep the future in our mind when we're tackling these issues. And I think it's very necessary that that unlimited freedom, as we do not let our children play with harmful toys, as we do not let our children enter certain environments because they're underage, that unlimited space, virtual space, we should also keep in mind that our children can face, can be confronted, can be communicated by those who would deliberately try to harm them. And this is something very important. Turkish Parliament will also be passing a law that will limit the age to 15, and not only limiting the age, but also limiting their access, limiting and restricting the content that could be also harmful for children in online space. I think this is a very important step that Turkish Parliament is also taking to protect our future generations.
Mehmet Çelik, thank you so much for that excellent analysis. I'll be right back with you.
Thank you, Mark.
Ukrainian police and volunteers are evacuating residents from frontline villages in the Zaporizhzhia region as the security situation worsens there due to advancing Russian troops. It comes as Russia and Ukraine enter a new round of U.S.-brokered peace talks in Abu Dhabi.
With bags packed, residents of Ukraine's frontline villages of Tavriska and Yurkivka in the Zaporizhzhia region evacuated on Tuesday. The security situation has worsened due to advancing Russian troops, with the area coming under intensified attacks. Aerial bombs, rockets and the growing use of fibre-optic FPV drones have left residents living in fear.
It's scary. Nobody wants to die. I know I don't have much time left. But this kind of death.
Mother of 5, Marina Vizhnevska, says shelling in the area has become too frightening to bear.
We thought everything would get better. We thought they would be driven back and all this would stop. But when we realised it would only get worse and worse, it was better to leave altogether.
Ukraine's military says fighting has intensified in recent weeks in key areas on the southeastern front. While evacuating residents, Ukrainian police said they had found evidence of a sleeper drone nearby.
This is a fiber optic cable. It's the connection to an enemy drone. The operator is sitting at a distance beyond the range where an FPV drone can be controlled by radio. He controls it using this fiber. If you can see it, break the fiber, and then there is no connection.
As Russia and Ukraine enter a new round of US-brokered peace talks in Abu Dhabi, Moscow's forces are lurching forward on multiple parts of the 600-mile front line. Russia is grinding towards Zaporizhia, the capital of one of 4 regions the Kremlin has claimed as its own.
Welcome back to the program. Joining me now to discuss the latest developments from Russia and Ukraine is Prem Singh Gill, who is a fellow at the Royal Asiatic Society in London. Prem, welcome to the program.
Very good morning.
Prem, this meeting is underway in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi. The United States is there, Ukraine is there, and Russia. We've seen meetings before as well, but those rounds failed to produce a breakthrough. What are those issues and what will be discussed today? Today is the final day of those talks in Abu Dhabi. Please tell us more about this.
Abu Dhabi represent the most significant diplomatic effort since Russia's invasion nearly 4 years ago. But as the second round continues today, both sides are downplaying the expectation for any breakthrough. The question is, why do these talks keep failing? The answer comes down to 3 fundamental sticking points that reveal just how far apart Moscow and Kiev really are. So first, there is a territorial question, and it is the non-negotiable for both sides. Russia controls about 90% of Donbass region, but is demanding that Ukraine surrender the remaining 10%, which is roughly around 5,400 kilometers that Ukrainian forces have defended for 4 years. So Moscow claims that this part and encourage a formula from an alleged agreement between Trump and Putin last August. So Ukraine flatly rejects it, arguing that rewarding aggression will only invite some more aggression down the line. So some of the workarounds have been proposed to demilitarize zones, which is known as a free economic zones, but that details are a mess. So how wide would a buffer zones be? 10 kilometers, 20? So who governs them and who monitors them? Russia has already rejected international peacekeepers on Ukrainian soil. And there is Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Russia demands recognition of its control. Well, the Ukrainian insists on demilitarization and International Atomic Energy Agency oversight. So there's no middle ground yet. So the second issue is security guarantees. Ukraine is willing to give up its NATO aspiration, but only in exchange for ironclad commitments for the US and European allies. So think of the Article 5 level guarantees, which automatically military responses, potential troops deployment, the works. So here's the paradox. Guarantees strong enough to actually deter Russia would be unacceptable to Moscow. So which I would reckon that it sees them as a NATO expansion by another name, but weaker guarantees won't reassure Kiev, and Ukraine has a good reason to be skeptical. So if you remember the Budapest Memorandum, back in 1994, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for security assurance from Russia, the US, and as well the UK. So the assurance proved worthless in 2014 and 2022. But at the current proposal lack the specifics Ukraine needs, how many troops, where, and how fast can they respond. So without those details, it's all just words on paper. So the third problem is Russia's track record on ceasefires. So the Trump administration brokered a temporary truce on energy infrastructure strikes ahead of this round. So what did Russia do? It has launched one of the largest attacks, over 70 missiles and 450 drones targeting Ukraine's power grid in sub-zero temperatures. So over 200,000 people in Kharkiv lost power. 1,100 buildings in Kharkiv were affected. Russia even struck the motherland monument. So I would reckon that Moscow used to pause to stockpile weapons and identify targets. So without the verifiable monitoring, satellite surveillance, joint patrols, automatic and penalties for violation, these truces just become advantages for Russia's.
Prem, tell me about the Trump administration. Tell me about how Donald Trump is balancing Russia and Ukraine, because he's pushing for talks as well in various locations across the globe, and then he's arming Ukraine as well at the same time. So how is he balancing both of these countries? Because some people have said that he's asking the Ukrainians to compromise to cede territory to Russia, and then the Europeans have also criticized Trump for supporting Russia too much. So how is he balancing this situation at this point?
So in this case, the Trump administration approach to the Ukraine conflicts embodies a delicate and often contradictory balancing act, prioritizing diplomatic engaging in Abu Dhabi title talks with Russia and Ukraine while sharply curtailing new military support for Kyiv, all in pursuit of a swift negotiated end to the nearly 4-year war. From the U.S. perspective, so this strategy stems from the President Trump campaign promise in order to resolve the conflict quickly, viewing a continued aid as prolonging this stalemate rather than the forcing concessions. Yet it navigates internal tensions with the White House liberating threats of aid cutoffs to pressure Ukraine into territorial compromises, even as Congress pushes back to sustain support and deter a Russian aggression. But on the military aid, the administration has requested no new funding from Congress since Trump's inauguration in January 2025, marking a dramatic shift from the Biden era's approximately 65 to 69 billion dollars in U.S. assistance. So instead, it relies on pre-existing commitments, which with deliveries continuing under prior authorizations, though at a reduced pace amid suspensions at certain intelligence sharing that reportedly bolstered the Russian defenses during Ukraine's operations. So Congress, however, has stepped into fill the gap, authorizing $800 million under the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. So this dynamic allows Donald Trump to engage diplomatically in Abu Dhabi, where envoys like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner shuttle between the delegation, focusing on the ceasefires, territorial issues, and reconstruction while using aid restraint as a tool to urge Kyiv toward flexibility and Donbas concessions. So ultimately, this leverage is determined by inherent contradiction to compel the Ukraine to yield on the territory and security, while Trump had threatens full abandonment. Yet convincing Russia to compromise requires credible demonstration of sustained U.S. backing of Kyiv, creating a strategic impasse. So Putin has exploited this by violating truces like the recent strategy infrastructures paused amid sub-zero temperatures, while stalling in talks, betting on U.S. domestic fatigue and division to favor Moscow. But internal U.S. fractures, including envoy resignation of Ann Pittingan, White House clashes, further erode resolve, and it is criticizing Trump's aid cuts for weakening Ukraine's hand. So without the battlefield, shifts are unified transatlantic pressure, the Abu Dhabi process risk yielding rhetoric over results, leaving the U.S. leverage potent in theory but fragile in practice.
Prem, we're in the last 5 minutes. So briefly, I want to touch upon the European perspective because just recently we've seen statements coming from Germany, from France. Merz and Macron, they've both said that Russia is not interested in a ceasefire or in achieving peace. And Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, he has said that Russia is only interested in creating chaos. So how are European leaders looking at what's happening right now and these talks in Abu Dhabi? I believe there is a technical issue. Mehmet, before we end the program, I'll ask this question to you. Tell me what's your view when you look at how European leaders have been treating the war in Ukraine?
Well, I mean, I think when we look at how they were looking at Ukraine-Russia conflict before Trump 2.0 versus now, there's a big difference, of course. I think they have been shifting their position on Ukraine war due to pressure from Donald Trump and how Donald Trump places Europe within this conflict. So there has been that shift that they're now also settling for that compromise or relatively compromising situation of Ukraine to understand that, you know, this continuation of the war is not on the U.S. agenda or Donald Trump's specifically. So I think they have come to understanding that prolonging the war is no longer the option, and they have come to understanding that Donald Trump, you know, they will either be, you know, for the lack of a better word, more humiliated versus Russia, or they need to come to understanding that let's end this war and let's look at how we can proceed future when it comes to European security architecture.
Mehmet, thank you so much for that analysis and for the headlines from Daily Sabah, everything that we've discussed today. Thank you so much for being in the studio with us. Thanks to Prem Singh Gill as well. We lost him, unfortunately, due to a technical issue, but that brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.